Hello, good evening to everyone. I would like to welcome the jury members of Verzió International Human Rights Film Festival at the last evening of our program. Thank you for joining us and sharing your views with the audience and with us. The discussion will be divided into three parts. So we are going to discuss several issues connected to the competitions with the jury members separately. I mean, first with the members of the Hungarian competition jury, then with the student and debut competition jury, and then with the student jury. So first, let me turn to Csilla Kató and Péter Kerekes. Let me introduce you very briefly. So Csilla Kató is from Romania, and she is the artistic director of Astra Film Festival, served in many international film festival juries, worked as an expert in various international industry programs. Péter Kerekes is from Slovakia. He is a film director, producer, teacher, and his special interest toward history and memory resulted in important documentaries, for example, Cooking History in 2009. So my first question is that you both have equally rich professional background, but I'm curious what you think about the category of human rights film, if they gain more importance nowadays, or if they dissolve more with other types of documentary films. So it's difficult to make a difference in your experience.
So who should answer?
If you like, you can start, Csilla, yes. If you like.
Hi, good evening. In fact, I wanted to say that I'm for the first time in a Human Rights Film Festival jury. So I was very puzzled how to evaluate the films as a jury member. And eventually we have started to discuss this, the jury. Eventually we asked Oksana what to do and what is the criteria, how to set the criteria to judge the films. And Oksana told us that the film we decide to award ideally should be a combination of a strong visual representation and a compelling team, a compelling human rights team. So we do not have to judge the film solely on the basis of human rights commitment, which was eventually a relief because I was puzzled how to find a hierarchy on the human rights issues presented in the films. How could one possibly make a ranking of the subjects like the official healthcare in the Russian jails, which eventually turns to be to poisoning the inmates, or films like about Holocaust victims, or the sexual the children who become victims of human trafficking and sexual abuse, and so on and so on. So eventually we had to judge the films from based on two criterias. So in that sense, it was good. On the other hand, as we all know, it is never enough to know more about the universal human rights and to understand how they are violated even today in our societies, which is very interesting also to see it. We are not aware enough and that's why it's very important to see these films, to have this festival. And I think good films and good documentaries are really important to be highlighted because they are eventually much better advocate than any kind of activist films. That is my view. I don't really like activist films. I really believe in documentary cinema, which is a good cinema, and it talks about universal human rights in a way that I cannot observe it. It's more convincing in that sense. So yes, that is my view on this topic. Maybe Peter can complete it.
Thank you, Chila, very much, because you said a lot of the things that I would like to say as well. Just shortly, for me, basically, it was very interesting to take part in this festival because on one side, I had a chance to see very good films. On the other side, if the films were not so good, they were really about interesting topics, most of them, or about important issues. The level of the films were slightly different. Like some of them were just really, I'm sorry to be a little bit cruel, but maybe just TV programs about a certain topic. But this topic was also interesting. Of course, my main attitude, approach, how to watch the film and how to judge the film was one is the crossing between a human rights topic, but also a very good filmmaking. And I think in the winner film, we had a chance to find this crossing point. And also we had to discuss other films that were for us really interesting in this case. Like, for example, in that there is a crossing point. Like for me personally, it was definitely the Return to Epipo, or also a film that was for me pretty strong, the film Ever, for example.
And now, thank you. Now closing to the Hungarian competition, do you think that this selection of the very new Hungarian films gives a good insight into the present situation of Hungarian society? And since you both come from countries where quite a large number of Hungarian minority lives, do you think that the issues highlighted in them are similar to the most important issues in your countries?
Well, maybe if I can start in this case, Chila.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know, to be honest. I don't have such an overview about contemporary Hungarian documentary cinema. So I'm living not in Hungary, and I speak the language, I know the culture, but I'm still a little bit a foreigner. So I have no deep overview about the contemporary Hungarian documentary cinema. I know only the crème de la crème, the best things that were produced there. But the topics that we had a chance to see are so general that it can basically happen anywhere in Europe or even in the world. The topic how to deal with the passing of some our relatives as the terminal stage, for example, or the topic how to deal with Alzheimer as the film called Ever, or the topic of sexual abuse as for example, Return to Epipo, that are topics that are important anywhere in the world. So it's not typically Hungarian thing.
Okay, I think the documentary filmmakers are not kind of, you know, they are choosing their subjects according to their sensitivities, and I mean there are a lot of criteria which lead them to choose their subject, and we cannot say that they kind of cover the main issues of one society. Or in that sense, you know, that there are the news in a normal society. What I can say is again what Peter said. Documentary films are very, very good means to know more about one society, and for sure, for example, the Hungarian competition now shows many aspects of Hungarian society which Hungarians from Hungary, they don't know. And that is the case for Romanian documentaries in Romania, and so on and so on. And there is an absurd situation, for example, in my case, I'm watching hundreds of documentaries every year for 20 years. And there are some countries from where we receive every year very good documentaries. And I know a lot of insights from those societies, which for sure an average citizen of that society doesn't know. This is an absurd situation. And of course, you know, most of the Hungarians from outside Hungary don't know a lot of aspects of Hungarian society. And another interesting insight I can share with you, I was brought up as a Hungarian in Romania. I made my university studies in Hungary, and I lived there for 10 years. And eventually, I made my thesis in anthropology, a BA thesis, about the documentary films of Balázs Béla Film Studio. And I eventually watched the more than 300 documentaries made in 20 years. And for me, it was absolutely revelatory experience, because I could connect after watching these films much better to the Hungarian society than before. So this is, I mean, somehow related to the question. Yes, I think it is very important to watch these films because we can connect to our society much better. I think eventually I've seen some interviews with the one of the filmmakers on the Facebook, and there were comments in the Facebook Live saying, a lot of people said for this shelter film, every high school students in Hungary should watch this film. People feel this. I mean, it's not just we as festival organizers that feel so much the need that these kind of very remote parts of our society should be known better. It's very important, I think. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I heard this conclusion many times from viewers after having watched films at Verzió Film Festival, because it's not just about the topics. I agree, but they reveal lots of important relations and how society deals or doesn't deal with certain problems. And concerning the formal filmic devices, what do you think about? I know it's a difficult question to talk about it in general, but what do you think? Can you name some weaknesses or strong features, characteristics of contemporary Hungarian cinema, documentary cinema?
Who should answer? I mean, I have to tell you that Peter was very, very critical about what we saw. I mean, these competition films. I get used to be more kind of diplomatic, but of course I've seen all the films and I know what they're about. It is always a problem in every festival, the local competition. So I wouldn't comment more about that. And I would say that that there were better years for Hungarian competition, if this is all the films which matters in this year. What we really liked about the film we choose for the award was the way how the director was using cinema to discover a human bird, rather than to disseminate a knowledge which he or she accumulated about the subject. And this was a very nice experience, and I think viewers can connect much better. And of course, it is much more convincing than any juridic argumentation about any human rights issue. So I think, and also I think it was very, very kind of interesting how we were following that journey of discovering. We were not even prepared to have that surprising scene at the end, which of course it just came out spontaneously during the shooting. So that was very interesting to have this this journey, which was not prepared. It was a kind of spontaneous discovery. Yeah, Peter, please.
Yes, Chila already told that I was hypocritical. I think this is kind of a Hungarian. It's kind of typical for Hungarian documentary films. What is based on the production background, that every year there is one, maximum two extraordinary films. And I'm sorry to say that, but basically the average is pretty low. And these one or two extraordinary films, just to name: Easy Lessons, 9 Months War, Ghetto Balboa, Woman Captured, 9 Months film, Granny Project. These films were thanks to dedicated directors and producers that were sacrificing their time, energy, and money to the film. But the level of the average production is much more lower, maybe, than the average of the production of the other countries. And maybe it is because there are not enough directors, but if you have to produce in really a small amount of money, then basically it's just impossible. So I think this, sorry to speak about sources and this basic things, but it mirrored in the films that were really super interesting topics, but made in several days and without the possibility of deeper and more precise development and production. You know, like most of the good films, documentary films, are done during 2, 3, 4 years. And if you are working under these conditions, you have to be ready in months. So I think that's the difference. But on the other side, we had the chance to see really like films that were made in a very nice and good way. Most of them I named already, and the winner film is definitely one of them. It's one of these extraordinary films.
Just to add something, we also agreed that if you work a lot on them, you can destroy a film by working too much on them and preparing too much. And we had good examples as well. So sometimes the spontaneity which comes through the film can help sometimes. Yeah. There are sometimes over-pitched films and overworked and over post-produced films, which are, you know, sometimes a bit kind of loose on their quality. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I understand. I think this is a very complex issue, and there have been many problems for years. But that's why film festivals are great occasions to have feedbacks and to share all these quality things and problems.
So okay. I think our time is over. Just I wanted to congratulate again the Verzió team to keep the flag of documentary films up and keep this dialogue even online. It is very important. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Csilla and Peter. And now let us turn to the jury members of the student and debut competition. Therese Vince, who is a film critic and professor at ELTE University in Hungary. She has served as a juror on several international film festival juries, and she's based in Budapest. And our other guest is Nenad Pócsik from Croatia, who is a professor of documentary filmmaking, author of numerous documentary films, founder of many important film institutions, and presently the director of the Zagreb Docs International Documentary Film Festival. So first of all, let me ask you about your expectations towards the student and debut films, if there were any, and how you shared these with each other.
Well, I'm going to start. Okay, Nenad. Well, I usually don't really have special or characteristic expectations when I go to a festival to watch films. My expectation is to watch good films all the time, everywhere. You can find great films at any film festival. So I'm just open to the experience. And I've heard that this selection was based on an open submission. So the base of the program was open submission. So anyone could send in their films, and then there were some preliminary jury which selected the work. But basically, when when I hear that this is going to be a first film and debut program, I'm just expecting, you know, very open young minds who are finding interesting topics in the world, and you know, sparks of new ideas and talent. So anything can possible. So I didn't really had any special expectations. I just wanted to watch nice documentaries, because based on my the experience of previous years at Verzió Film Festival, I always experienced great films and very important topics. So I usually just think Verzió as a good place to learn important things about the world. So this is what I expected, that this is going to happen this year as well with this special program. So and my expectations were fulfilled. I have seen interesting and very talented pictures. So that's all I think.
Well, if I can add, I agree, of course, with Teresa, but I don't think that young student or debut films should per se be something extraordinary, fresh or different or whatever, because young people, as anybody else, deal with a number of obstacles and problems in organizing, financing, and delivering the films. So I'm not expecting by itself something extraordinary or something new, whatever new is. I'm expecting a good and truthful and honest films. And today, I think that I'm looking for more and more, being a selector at my festival, more and more for truthfulness and direct approach, because the system of teaching and the system of developing and the system of young people having to go through 2 or 3 years of, you know, developing and getting money for the first film or the second film is very often making their films more static, more dead sometimes than if they just grab the camera and go and shoot. So I think that for all of us, it's important to make possible for young people and debut filmmakers to make good, not always big or great, good films, but to make them exactly the way they want, not the way commissioning editors, you know, slots or whatever define. Because we live in a culture of this kind of industrialization of documentaries, especially in Europe, with film funds and ministries of culture and commissioning editors and public television. It's very, very complicated, you know. When I did my first films, I would just go to a guy either in the film production house or on television, sit in his, or it was mostly his or her office, pitch in 10 minutes, and in a week I would know if I'm going to shoot a film or not. Today it takes months, years, you know, and I'm not sure that this is the best way, especially for younger people, to be encouraged. So if we don't see so much of the freshness, and I'm afraid I didn't see freshness in terms of, you know, aesthetics, also in using of new technologies, whatever they are, and they are, you know, countless today. I would suggest, you know, going and making the films even with a mobile phone, and be who you are. So I'm a bit afraid that the system of the European documentary, which is made to be safe for the investors, is not really something that's creating the best possible films, especially for the young people who have to obey often some requirements of the financiers, the way some more experienced or well-known filmmakers shouldn't.
Yeah, thank you. That was on my mind actually when I was thinking about this question, that maybe young filmmakers sort of have to replace their social capital with creativity and more experimental approaches. Concerning the topics of the films, because your competition was geographically quite diverse, so from all over the world, there were films. And what do you think about the topics? There were some highlights, definitely, connected to political issues or education, and gender issues. So do you think these highlights mirror our global problems, or the problems of societal problems of certain regions? Or how did you see this diversity?
I can start this time. In a way, I was happy not to have a kind of a theme for this year. You know, a couple of years it was Syria. Before that, it was China. And, you know, every couple of years, there is the topic everybody wants to make the film about. And next year is going to be COVID, that's for sure, or years to come. We will have hundreds of films about COVID. And, you know, again, this is very often result of requirements of the funders of the films. But this year, in this selection, at least there was not a single topic, and I find this to be good because we had more choice. On the other hand, I think that human rights festivals, in a way, have a problem that we in general kind of festivals don't have, which is that sometimes you have to put in the competition the film that has a very interesting topic, but it's not really made in the best possible way, as Peter was saying. And in my festival, we do it in a way that we have two competitions, and then the rest of the films are divided in different categories, mostly based on the topic they cover. Because human rights cannot be an excuse or the only reason to make the film, in my view. Human rights has to be the initial spark, you know, for you. Okay, I want to make a film about it, but then it's I want to make a film about it. You know, the first sentence in the first lecture, when I'm teaching documentaries, the documentary is not about reality. It's about how we see the reality. And hiding behind the reality sometimes can be dangerous and in a way hiding your personality, or maybe hiding that you don't have enough creative power. So it's a problem, I guess, a number of specialized human rights festivals are dealing with. But on the other hand, the production is bigger and bigger, and I'm sure that it's possible to find good films. And also it depends how you define human rights. You know, I think in a way that 80% of all the topics could be defined as human rights topic. I just raised the question the other day, is a human right to die a human right? I think it is, but it's not a part of, you know, baskets of human rights. It's not something that has a view of a standard human right. So I think it's about a festival. If you see a good film, to be very open, if you see a good film and you are programming a human rights festival, I'm sure there is a way to proclaim it to be a human rights film.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting question is, what qualifies as a human rights issue? Because today I was thinking that the documentary films I have seen in the last 3 years, which of them or how many of them would qualify as a human rights documentary film, and I would say most of them. Either I saw it on some like streaming platform or at an international documentary film festival. So that's one thing that many of the very good documentary films could be in a way called as a human rights documentary film. But regarding the selection which we have seen in our section of the festival, well, I think it's obvious that there are main topics or interesting topics which are always come up at this kind of human in connection with human rights or in documentary in general, like the environment. We have seen environment and activists and fighting for the environment. We have seen historic atrocities and the remembrance of the history of a nation, or we have seen investigating contemporary political problems and political situations. And actually we have seen many films about women's problems or women's struggle all around the world, which is very close to my heart. When I can learn something about the women all around the world, it's always interesting. But it was really really interesting to know as well that first and foremost I'm a film critic, so the topic, for me at least, the topic comes second. So first I want to see a very good movie, a very good cinema, which is using cinematic tools to tell a story. So visual storytelling is always, for me, it's very important, because when I come to see a documentary film, I come to see a movie, and many of the films did well on this front from our selection, and the topics were also there. So it was interesting topics. Sometimes one or the other were stronger. Sometimes the topics, sometimes the form or the style was closer to my heart. But first and foremost, I was really happy when I saw really nice documentaries, in the sense that they were telling the stories while thinking in visual terms. So yeah, I think. But I wouldn't consider this selection as some, like, you know, general picture about the human rights issues. These were obviously connected to human rights issues, and yeah, many of them were interesting interpretations about these issues.
Thank you. Now, as we are approaching to human rights issues, let me introduce the jury, the student jury, which decided about the winner of the Human Rights Award. And so first, Marila Arantes from Brazil, who is a student at Central European University. Bogdan Herkaling from Ukraine, who is a film student at ELTE University in Budapest with 5 years experience in filmmaking and production. Lucy Yanatova from Italy, who studied political science and sociology with special interest in social movements and artistic activism. Daniel Shah from Pakistan, who studied in Budapest at SFE, the University of Theatre and Film Arts, and previously worked as a photojournalist and writer. And Kristóf Schül from Hungary, who is a master's student in film studies at ELTE University. So my first question is very much related to the issues Therese and Nenad were talking about, the human rights films. And I would like to ask you about sorry, the criteria you were thinking about and maybe discussing before the jurying, since these criteria are almost the same as in selecting the films for the competition, but of course you might have had different ideas about it.
Hello, everybody. I will go first answering this. And the interesting point was that we actually agreed on not agreeing on any of the criteria before we have been watching the films. So after we have watched, we've been discussing films and blocks. And during the discussion, we actually understood that we're valuing and appreciating pretty much the same things, but just we're putting them in the different words. And in that way, it was easier for us to be on the same page in the end while making the final decision. Of course, we all realize that there are two big groups, content and the form, and we've been trying to look into both of them. When we're talking about the content, of course, timeliness and let's say urgency of the topic of the human rights topic, and fortunately enough, all the film, the selection was beautiful. We had any discussions about belonging of the films to these topics. Then we paid attention to how complete and how straightforward the filmmakers were discovering the topics. So do they go deep, or are they trying to touch, a lot of things in the same way, just on the surface? Very much we try to pay attention to the message that the film, that every separate film sends. Either it's a message of hope, unity, call to action, and the message was for us the main reason for the special mention of the Earth is Blue as an Orange, because the message that it sends, in our opinion, was the strongest and was the most interesting. When it comes to form, as some of us are film students and we have some cinematic background, we tried also to look into cinematic values and how innovative, how creative, what inventive power filmmakers had to deliver the topic to the audience in the best way. But in the end, we agreed that the main role as the documentary and the filmmaking in general is the is the dialogue between filmmakers and the society in the end. The biggest role here is the impact. What impact can the film can it have for the audience? And Welcome to Chechnya, the film that we awarded, again, in our opinion, has the strongest impact because it went far beyond being just the film itself. It became a project, a social message, with its collaboration with NGOs. Yeah, so I think that was the main criteria in the end for us.
Yeah, maybe I can continue just shortly because I don't want to steal the time from the others. So yeah, I think Bogdan mentioned all the things you need to know about our criteria. I just want to add that in the beginning, we thought of some quantitative method to rank the films, but then we realized that we had very similar opinions on many of the films, so we did not really needed to rely on these numerical methods or numbers. So I think it really quickly came to 2 films that were in the final round. We just didn't know which award goes to which film, but we could easily, I think, choose those 2 films that need to be awarded. And as Bogdan mentioned, yes, we mostly looked at the style and the form, and on the other hand, the subject or the topic. And these 2 categories, I think, created an exciting dynamics in the discussions of the films. And it was interesting that many of us has different backgrounds and interests, and we could argue on depending on these situations. So yeah, I really enjoyed the discussions in the virtual space. Yeah.
Well, I can quickly then complement what my colleagues said. Yes, the discussions in the virtual space were definitely the most important part, for me at least, because I think we help each other very well to see different aspects of the movies that others wouldn't see. For example, I'm the one who is illiterate in cinema, because I'm a political scientist, right? So I couldn't really evaluate the technical aspects of the movies as my colleagues were capable of. But although then the beauty was important to me, what I was evaluating more was the capacity of the movie to deliver the message. Then it's how they said it's that this is one of the reasons why Welcome to Chechnya was the winner, because we thought that it had accomplished its role of educating the audience about the problem that they were expressing. And it was very well contextualized, although still showing impactful shooting and very nice addition. So in some, it could establish easily a dialogue with the audience. And I think this was in the end, because we cannot rank the human rights issues, since all of them were very important. But our judgment was, in this case, about delivering the message and communicating with the audience.
I see. I think these are really crucial issues. And this social impact interests me most, what you were pointing out. And in that context, that you have quite different professional background, but in some ways you are all connected to Central Europe as a region. And what do you think about this problem? What social impact is needed most in Central Europe? or what can the audience impress most, if there are any such issues?
Again, I would like to go first, if I may. I will speak mostly about the Eastern Europe. I'm coming from Ukraine, and for 2 years I'm living and studying in Hungary. Maybe I don't have such a huge experience in the documentary itself, but I will just speak about my experience and my subjective opinion. I think the common ground here, from what I've learned, is it has several layers, and on the most common one, it's dealing with the past and dealing with memory and dealing with a lot of countries in this region have the same historical, or not the same, but similar historical background, dealing with communism, dealing with this wars and traumas, and I think we're still dealing with it because it's a process that demands step-by-step gradual progress, and I think we're somewhere hopefully halfway through that, and that's what recognizing our own mistakes and as a nations, as a countries in this past experience that we had is a very important process, and that I think is what documentary filmmaking and documentary films from our region is trying to help with. Moving from the most common layer to more specific is the flaws and in a soft way saying imperfections of the state system that our countries have. I'm saying about corruption here, and I'm saying about the collaboration of the state with the crime and moving into the crime stories, and I'm saying here about the topics that one of the recent films that at the last year's film festival, Verzió, the Romanian film collective, delivered, and a lot of other films are trying also to deal with. And on the most specific layer, in my opinion, here is the stand that some specific people or some specific groups of people take against that system or against that circumstances that they're with. And all of the films, most of the films that I watched, including Hungarian Give Me Shelter, including Return to a People, including Collective, even Welcome to Chechnya. It's not exactly, it's about Eastern Europe, but not from Eastern Europe. They're telling about this, about the group of people, about the small societies. They're taking the stand against something that they're unwillingly ended up being in.
I would like to add, so I come from Pakistan, and when I looked at the thematic areas of all the films, I feel like, okay, this is very common that I experienced in Pakistan. But I lived in Hungary for a year, and as an observer, I could see that most of the themes could really relate to what happens in Hungary. For example, the films dealing with minorities or LGBT or the lack of legal system, and like, for example, the film Lindy, where from Sweden, and it's about a Roma guy who's an LGBT, and I see like every day in the legal system of Hungary how segregation is and part of the system between the Romas or the Hungarians. I mean, I could just talk about as an observer living in Hungary. So most of the themes that I could see in the festival, I could relate to them, first of all, from my home country, and then living in Hungary.
Yeah, thank you. And my last question is about how we learn from documentaries, because they are all sort of source of knowledge. And I would like to ask you if you could name particular films which were very important for you as a source of knowledge in your profession, in your studies, so which you can turn into something else, not just as a cinematic experience.
I'll go first and briefly. So coming from the field of social science, we're constantly reading and researching and looking to numbers and terminologies, but we cannot really feel empathy or at least fully understand a problem only through reading. Then I'll give you the example of Wake Up on Mars, because it shows the struggle of a refugee family in Sweden. And if I read an article talking about the resignation syndrome, which is the problem addressed by the movie, I will be aware of what that means and how it is a dramatic problem, but I will not necessarily feel empathy because I cannot really see how it operates in real life and how it affects people. So when I watch the documentary, I can see how the resignation syndrome operates in real life, how it will affect the human lives. I can see the pain of the family who was deprived of the children. I can see the parents trying to keep the other children safe while struggling to take care of the daughters who are in coma. So these images, they cause emotions like sadness, fear, anger, and this is definitely something that is necessary to take us from academia and to mobilize us to do something fighting for social action. And then finally, and more important, I would say that these films, all of them in general, for me, what they had in common was reminding that human rights violations are not a thing for the grown-ups, because a constant topic of the movies was how the childhoods were being impacted by bad governments or bad political decisions made by the adults, and how, for example, in the earth, blue as an orange, the children are growing in the war, or in Immortal, the children are growing and being educated through a strong and brutal nationalism. So the kids are indeed the most vulnerable groups, and that's why they should be considered in as the priorities in any political or social decision.
I could just add to Marilia, like the film that stands with me is the Art is as Blue as Orange. And how it impacted me was, first of all, to see how people deal with trauma through film, how they use art as a therapy to deal with trauma, and how director was so much involved to be able to bring that to the audience. So first of all, I get knowledge about what's happening in Ukraine, how small communities are affected because of war, and then how they deal with war through art therapy.
And I will finish. So I'm a political sociologist, but also have an experience with filmmaking and with activism. And basically both in my work and also in my daily life, I mostly deal with the questions of social movements and artistic activism. So when it comes to watching documentary films, I'm usually the most impacted by two types of films. And the first ones are the ones that are dealing with some contemporary human rights abuse, and basically whose creation is sort of complemented with a strong advocacy campaign. And a great example of that is Welcome to Chechnya, as Bodya was already speaking about, that we awarded this year. I think that in my experience, from what I've seen, films are basically the most one of the most influential mediums when it comes to awareness-raising campaigns, because unlike books or journal articles, they are basically the best at what Marilia was speaking about, at conveying this particular atmosphere of the issue that is at stake. They're also capable of quickly establishing some kind of some kind of strong connection with the victims on emotional level, but also on a level of knowledge of the context. And they enable the filmmakers and also basically the victims and the activists to speak about and share very, very multifaceted and very context-dependent messages, but in a way that's comprehensive, also to a wider audience. So this is very important if you want to spread our message quickly and also to as diverse audiences as possible. And the second type of films I really, really like are documentaries that follow the creation of a specific artistic project. So be it either filmmaking or theater or anything else. I can mention The Earth is Blood and Orange here, or also Srebenka, that won the Human Rights Award at Verzió in 2018, I think. And in both of them, basically art serves as a tool of processing trauma, but also as a discussion opener, which impacts the audience in a completely different level than, again, articles or television debates or anything would. So art serves not only as a tool for individual transformation, but also shows its potential for social change on a much larger scale. So in terms of some like general takeaways connected to knowledge that can be gained from watching documentaries, I think the social transformation that goes beyond just some influence is very important. Also, some kind of understanding or ability to understand that we can, even as normal audience, make an actual difference by realizing through watching where we can help. It can be anything. You know, there is a power for the viewers as well. It can be a donation to something or a petition if it's about an issue that is quite local, or some other kind of act of kindness, or some just using our civic responsibilities can be extremely powerful and impactful. And one last thing that films do to us, I believe, is kind of extending this ability of critical thinking, because great films usually do not just stop at one particular issue, but often introduce many, many topics and many possible angles at looking at them. And this basically often shakes our kind of normalizing ideas. Like sometimes, unfortunately, even in democratic societies, violence and other abuse of human rights are just going unpunished because people just kind of normalize them in their heads. And I feel like often watching films, even if they are set in completely different environments, very much can open your eyes about local abuse of powers also in your neighborhood. And this is happening on a daily basis. And I think that films can actually break through it, which is very, very important.
Thank you very much. I think it was a wonderful ending of our discussion. So thank you for joining us and spending this short hour with us. And also, I would like to say thank you for all of you for devoting your time and energy and expertise to Verzió International Film Festival. And one more thing, I forgot to name two other jury members who are not able to be present here. Giedrė Žičkytė from Lithuania, who was the third jury member of the student debut competition jury, and Maria Carrion from Brazil, who was the third member of the Hungarian competition jury. So thank you very much for being with us, and have a nice evening. And also thank you for the audience to follow our discussion.